Okay, Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the overview course of the 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita. So we'll start with the Mangala Charana. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjalashalaakaya Chakshurum Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Shri Guruhu, Vande Aham Shri Guruhu Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagara Jatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadavaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhobhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yeah, very good. So
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Today is a very, very interesting chapter. This chapter is called The Yoga of the Supreme Person. And before we start today's chapter, we'll just cover some of the key points we discussed yesterday in chapter 14, which was all about the three gunas. So what we learned there was the three gunas in the material world are always distracting the living entities, and through the distraction process, the material entity entraps the living entity and thereby creating a bondage either in the mode of goodness, bondage in the rajasic mode, and bondage can happen even in the tamasic mode. Now, what the Lord said, or what we saw in that chapter, was that these gunas can be overcome. We can become a gunatita. That means we can become as pure as the eternal spirit that we all come from. And what will help us in being able to do that? It is nothing else, and it's a very simple process, which is called the devotional service. Now, what does devotional service help us to do? Devotional service keeps you away from all these kind of petty, elementary things that are unnecessary for us in leading our lives. So what does devotional service do? It gives us that energy. It gives us that energy to be able to look through or look over these things which are absolutely meaningless, and it helps us to enrich our lives. It also helps us to look beyond the normal realm of things and helps us to kind of, achieve a higher purpose in life. Then remember always that devotional service is so powerful. It never fails us. It never fails us because it is all to do with that creator. It is all to do with that supreme God consciousness, who is ever willing, who's a Karuna Sindhu, who's a Bhakta Vatsala, and there can be nobody who can be as kind, as compassionate as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And devotional service also, serves as a natural filter. It filters out the unwanted things that are unnecessary, unwarranted, and as well as something that is going to be unworthy for our life, unworthy for achieving the goals of our life. So devotional service acts as a natural filter. And devotional service doesn't have a fashion statement. It never goes out of fashion. It is always something that you can really, have it in you all the time, because it is everlasting, it's evergreen, it is eternal, and it's always meaningful. Okay. Sometimes some of the subjects that we study may lose this relevance based on our needs at that particular time or at a particular juncture in our life. But devotional service is evergreen. It is eternal. It is always blissful. It always gives you that peace. So therefore, the gunas or the ill effects of these gunas can be overcome through devotional service. And there are 4 key points that the devotional service caters to. One is, it is an energizer. It is a natural energizer. You don't need to have, an energy bar. It is an energizer for the body. It is an energizer for the mind. It is an energizer to keep the intellect ever active. And also the soul happy. At the end of the day, the soul is the one that gives us the consciousness to be aware of things and also to rise above the basic material awareness to the spiritual awareness. Now, how to acquire the knowledge? We elaborated on the 20 qualities or the 20, knowledge, 20 qualities that are required to acquire knowledge, which was from chapter 14, from verses 8 to 11. We kind of read through them from the purport of Srila Prabhupada, and we kind of had a understanding of each of those qualities. Then, what is a sign of a person who's a gunatita? What is a sign of a person who has overcome these gunas? The signs are, such people are balanced. They're neither high or they go low on any event or any experience that they go through. They are very neutral. They don't have any kind of biases towards anything. They are neutral. And they are equal to all. And they have a lot of peace internally, which exhibits itself externally. And thereby, they are always someone who look very enlightened and bright in any group, in any surrounding, and in any situation. Okay, so that's what we studied in the chapter that we did yesterday. So today we are going to look at the yoga of the Supreme Person. I'm going to dwell on the first 4 verses from the Veda base itself. So I'm going to take you right there. Let me go to text 1. So here the Bhagavan says, it's a very interesting verse. In fact, there can be very long discussions only on this first verse. Okay. But anyway, I'll give you a quick understanding of what the first 4 verses really mean in terms of this subject that we are going to read today, called the Yoga of the Supreme Person. Anyone has any questions before I jump in here with respect to the chapter we concluded yesterday and with anything else that you might have in your mind? Hare Krishna. Anybody? Any question? Okay, so let me jump in. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Urdhava Moolam Adha Shakam Ashwatam Prahur Avyayam Chandamsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Sa Vedavit. Okay, what does it mean? The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Urdhava Moolam. He's talking about a tree called Ashwatha. I will tell you, I'll come back to the characteristics of Ashwatha a little later. So he talks about a tree called Ashwatha. He says this Ashwatha tree is Avyayam, it's imperishable banyan tree with its roots upward, Urdhava Moolam, with the roots upward, and Adha Shakam means with the branches downwards, and it is eternal, it's Avyayam, Chandamsi Yasya Parnani, which means the leaves of this tree, the leaves that are there in the branches of this tree, which is with its roots upwards, the branches downwards, are the Vedic hymns. And he says, anyone who knows this is the knower of Vedas. What here it means is the roots upward, Urdhava Moola. See, please understand, Krishna constantly explains concepts of life and living through fine examples. So this Ashwatha tree is yet another metaphor or another example that the Lord gives us to help us to understand the way we are probably caught up in our life. Now this tree, there is no tree, it's an imaginary, it's an imaginary thing. So here he says this tree, Ashwatha, do you know what Ashwatha tree is? Ashwatha tree is a banyan tree. And as you know, the characteristics of the banyan tree is while it grows in one place, at the same time, the branches, they bend down. A lot of shoots come down from the branches. And the area that the Ashwatha tree or the banyan tree covers becomes huge and becomes forest-like. It becomes a forest of a banyan, of the banyan tree. And the banyan tree is called Ashwatha because in the age-old days, lot of animals, particularly the horses, would come and take rest under the foliage of the banyan tree because the banyan tree used to have a dense foliage. So under the banyan tree, a lot of these animals would rest, and so would a lot of the travelers and passers-by. So it is something that lives for many years. The banyan tree lives for many years because it keeps sending down secondary shoots. So there's a primary bark and it keeps sending down the secondary shoot so that it just spreads. Okay. And in the olden days, every temple used to have a banyan tree. The banyan tree is also worshipped in India. And a lot of our great philosophers, thinkers, they all attained their self-actualization or self-realization under the banyan tree. People like Valmiki, Vyasadeva, then Buddha, they all attained the self-actualization, or they all realized the Brahman under the banyan tree. The banyan tree has also got a lot of other names. It's called people tree, it's called the Bodhi tree. So that is the quality of a banyan tree. And the banyan tree is also, I think it's got a botanical name. I forget the botanical name. But it's called the tree of life. So what does it mean? So the Lord here is saying, here is a tree with the roots upward, with the branches downwards, and then the leaves are the Vedic hymns. What he means here is, the root of existence comes from the Supreme Brahman, the Parabrahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the cause of the creation. The trunk represents Brahma, the creator. The branches represent the different realms in which different entities are present. And the leaves, he says, is the Vedic hymns. It means that the banyan tree, the typical characteristic of banyan tree is it spreads to a very large area of land. So unless a society is rich by way of knowledge, the upliftment of the society can never happen. It is knowledge that gives us the power. Remember, I said this even in the last chapter. Knowledge is power. Knowledge by way of formal education or informal experiences gives us that power to deal with life and also to lead a good life. So what it means is the more the foliage, that is the extent to which the society, it's not about the tree, it is about the society that is well educated. Such a society, such a kind of a community grows well. So that's what he means. Now he also says one who knows this knows the Vedas. Now he's not talking only about the Vedas here. He's talking about this entire tree. This tree with the roots upwards is the one from where the life consciousness comes. The life consciousness is important for us, all the living entities, to lead their life. If that life consciousness or that God consciousness or that consciousness that comes from the Supreme Lord were not to be there, then this material energy will not be in an active state. And the material energy to thrive well, living by the scriptures and the injunctions, and as well as by the knowledge of the Vedas, is very, very important. So that's what this first verse says. Now let me jump or take you to the next verse. Any questions on this? It's slightly difficult. I've made it very simple for you. Any questions on this? The Ashwatha tree? Any questions on the Ashwatha tree?
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yeah.
Mataji, could you please explain again about the branches?
Yeah.
The downward motion.
Yeah. The branches are the various planes in which the living entities are present. The living entities could be the humans, animals, beasts, and it also can be all the various higher planetary systems, entities like all the demigods. Now, the branches are nourished by, this is what is going to come here. He says, Adas chordam prashtars tasya shakha guna pravriddha vishaya pravalaha adascha mulani anushantatani karmanu bandhani manushaloke. It means adaha urdavam, the branches downward, the branches they exist both upward and downward. That is, the branches are there they go up and down, and these branches are nourished by the modes of nature. These sakas are nourished, are developed and nourished by the modes of nature. Okay, because the entities that occupy or that kind of live on these branches are nourished by the modes of nature. When I say nourished, are a composite of the three modes of nature. And thereby they occupy either a higher branch or a lower branch. Now, the twigs are the tip of the branches are the sense objects. Okay, and then he says, the branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the three modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going downward because it's an Ashwatha tree. The secondary branches go downward. And these are bound to the fruitive actions of the human society because of the sense objects, because of the way the sense objects react with the modes of nature. We develop desires, and these desires are the secondary shoots of these branches which go downward and bind us to this material energy or the material upward. So did you understand? The roots are upward. The energy for us, for this tree to survive, the survival of this energy depends on the energy that it receives from the Lord, who is the Supreme Personality. And we kind of, living on these branches, depending on the body type we have, we regale in the modes of nature, depending on our taste and the body type that we have. And based on the various sense objects that these living entities, the types of the living entity body that each one of us have, we enjoy those in the based on the various, based on the type of body that we have and the type of body that would like or acquire that kind of a mode of nature. And thereby we develop certain desires. Those desires then, they bind us to this material world. Okay, so did you understand?
Yes, Mataji.
Okay, now he says in the third words, he says the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. So there is no such tree as such. You can't perceive it. But what it really means is that we all have a source of creation coming in from the Lord, and the rest of it is what we kind of create based on the body type we have and our desires, and thereby we entangle ourselves in a cocoon. We weave a web, we weave a cocoon around ourselves, and we become a prisoner of our own desires. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, because the desires are so contagious, and they are kind of, they keep giving roots to new things. Today one desire, and tomorrow that desire multiplies. There's a multiplier effect happening on every desire that we harbor or that we kind of, keep hankering for. So therefore, this tree, which is imaginary, one can never know where this tree has started, which is where the desire has started, and there is no end to the desire, or where its foundation is. At the end of the day, when you sit back and say, where did all this start? You will never be able to identify where a particular desire, suppose the desire is for, say, to be the most well-dressed person. And maybe after some time, you're tired. And then you think, how did all this start? You will never be able to know where it started. Okay. So he says, but with determination. But if you make up your mind that you don't want to allow the desire to kind of overcome you and multiply, then this root, this strong rooted tree must be cut. And how will you cut it? You can only cut it with the weapon of detachment. With the weapon of detachment, meaning understanding that you need to somewhere say, no, I cannot let this rule my life. I need to rule my life the way I want, so that my ultimate aim and purpose of the life is to get my moksha, to get my liberation. So if one wants moksha and liberation, we must be well guarded of our emotions, our experiences, and our desires. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns. What happens when you do that? When you do that, you are kind of cleansing your soul within. You are cleansing your desires, you're cleansing your subtle body, you're cleansing your mind and intellect, and your false ego completely ebbs away or goes away or dissolves. When that happens, your soul gets cleansed. Cleansing of the soul means you're carrying less baggage into the next body that you are likely to acquire, if at all you have to acquire one. So such a person who completely surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead will ultimately, be able to kind of find his or her path to the eternal abode of the Lord, which is immemorial. Which is immemorial, which has existed. The Lord's abode is immemorial. It has always existed. It's eternal. It is everlasting. It is immeasurable. It's imperishable. Okay. So these 4 verses is what I wanted to show you from this, but now I will jump to the to the slide that we have for you. So was this clear? This Ashwatha tree, did you understand? This is a very important example, and this is a very important, it has a huge, bearing on our devotional path and our spiritual progress. Okay. So was this clear to you? Was it okay?
Yes, Mataji.
Anybody, any questions? Any thoughts, any comments? Vijay Mataji, thank you for coming. You want to add something, Mataji? Hare Krishna. Vijay Mataji, Krishna Prabhu, or want to add something? Okay, everybody is quiet. Okay. Now, I will go to the presentation. Okay. Can you see my screen? Can you see my presentation? No? 1 minute.
No, Mataji, it's not.
One second. Here's my presentation. Now it will be seen. Yeah. Can you see this now?
Yes, Mataji.
Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now let me go to the, yeah. I always have a problem here. Okay. Okay. So we saw the Ashwatha tree. Okay. So the botanical life. Okay. There's another beautiful thing about the Ashwatha tree, and why the Ashwatha tree is, is revered and is also spiritually, has a spiritual relevance is the bark of the tree, the leaves of the tree are all have medicinal property. That is one thing. The second thing is the Ashwatha tree also kind of releases a certain chemical called isoprene. And this chemical is very important to keep the, prevent the ozone depletion in the atmosphere. So we need to understand how evolved our ancestors were and how much they valued environment and how much they valued, keeping our lives healthy. Okay. And that's why they were very, very wealthy, not only in terms of wealth that this country had, but also they were wealthy in terms of their knowledge, and also they led a very good life. And thanks to all the invasions that happened in this country, all our knowledge was completely uprooted and it was destroyed. Otherwise, we would have been one of the best communities and one of the best societies if it had not been for the indiscriminate kind of, things that fell upon us in terms of invasions that happened from all corners. Okay. So the branches, as you see the branches, there are branches looking downwards and there are branches upwards. The upward branches are all the branches where all the spiritual, when I say spiritual, these are the higher planetary system where the demigods and all stay. The lower planetary, the middle planetary system is where all the human beings are. And what are the human beings constantly hankering for? They're constantly hankering for dharma, karma, kama, moksha. That is, they're looking for economic development, which is dharma. Karma is their fruitive activities and pious activities. It can be both. Then it is religiosity is religion, is our faith. Then you have sense gratification, which is kama. Then you have, these are the things that Vedic hymns. Vedic hymns actually means knowledge. And who has given us that knowledge? The knowledge has been given to us by Vyasadeva. And where did Vyasadeva get it from? Vyasadeva got it from Lord God himself. And Vyasadeva was an incarnation of him. Okay. So this is that imaginary tree, and Lord is saying we must cut that tree of attachment so that we can get liberated. So what does it mean when you get liberated? That's what he says in this verse. Liberation means we have that ticket to go enter the gates of Vaikuntha. What does he say here? Natat bhashyate suryo na shashanko na pavakah yad gatva na nivartante Tat dhama paramam mama. That abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by electricity. One who reaches it never returns to this world. So ultimately, moksha is what we should all look for. And we must make sure and understand always whenever, we are hankering for things, or when we have our ego working on us, think of this, Ashwata tree, and try and see that you're able to cut off that Ashwata tree, the trunk of that Ashwata, the trunk of your desires, so that you are able to kind of rise up and imbibe better qualities that will help you to kind of lead a balanced life and balance of experiences. Okay, he says my abode doesn't need, it's only in this material world we need all these facilities and all these kind of amenities are needed in this material world. In the abode of the Lord, in the Vaikuntha planets, and particularly in the abode of the Lord called the Vrindavan Loka, or the Vrindavana, Goloka Vrindavana, there is no need for any kind of these worries, because in that world there's nothing like, the 6 stages of life is not there. Birth, growth, then growth, and then old age, disease, and death kind of things do not exist, because it is a land, or it is a space where there is no desire, and when there is no desire there is always peace. And that all those planets, or all that abode is completely where there is Lord, who is the illuminator of the cosmos. Where is the need for that land to have any kind of illumination? That illumination, that energy, that power, that sukham, that kind of bliss is automatically available to you without us having to really work for it, because that is a space of absolute peace. That is the abode of the absolute spiritual Brahman. Okay. Now that is how, this is how somebody has said that place would look like. Absolutely angelic, absolutely, beautiful, and something which will always give you that bliss and, complete, sublime. That sublime kind of a feeling is what you will always there. There's nothing that we need to really struggle and work for in that loka. So now he says, Mamaiva amso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha manaha shastan indriyani prakriti shtani karsati. Someone read this translation, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Yes, come, Mataji.
The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmented parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with these 6 senses, which include the mind.
Yeah,
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Thank you. So the living entities in the conditioned world are completely, so kind of, caught up in the daily part of, their struggle for life, that they forget, or we forget who we are, and we forget our eternal, the path of eternity from where our journey has begun. And we also forget that our journey has to go back into that path, go back onto that path, and not to another path, which is constantly going to give us only grief and sadness, and that which will not help us in terms of our engagement to transcendental service, and to finally get that liberation that every eternal soul must ultimately look forward to. And he kind of, warns us about our 6 senses, all the 5 sense organs and the mind. These 2 are the culprits. So therefore, its devotional service, as I said, is a filter. It will help you to guard yourself from any kind of, elements that are going to be distractive, and it will keep you on a path which will keep you steady on your devotional or your spiritual service, or at least on a path that will help you more towards liberation. Okay. Now 15.8, he says, Shariram yet avapnoti yet chapi utkramatishvaraha grihati vaitani samyati vayur gandhan ivashayat. Someone read the translation, Hare Krishna.
Yes, the living entity in the material world carries this different conception of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. So here, the purport of, of this shloka, Prabhupada writes, the living entity is described as Ishvara because we are part and parcel of that Ishvara. Okay. And the controller of his own body. The Lord is the control of the all the cosmos. He is the controller of the entire Bhumandala, and there are several Bhumandalas. He is a super soul. But the living entity, the soul within us, is the controller of our body. Okay. Now, the change that this body undergoes depends upon him. Now, what changes I undergo, what kind of a transmigration happens in me, depends on me. At the time of death, the consciousness he has created will be carried. Remember, we've been discussing this, time and again in all these chapters. All the vasanas, all the kind of experiences that we have, all the unfulfilled desires come into us and carry forward. You have a balance sheet. A balance sheet always, when there is an excess of something, a liability or an asset gets carried forward. So similarly, here, the assets that we collect and as well as the liabilities we collect, in fact, more of the liabilities and probably less of the assets will get carried forward. And based on that desire, if for instance, Prabhupada also gives a beautiful example. He says, one has an intense desire for eating. So you will get that body type where that desire will get fulfilled. So that's what he says. The living entity in this material world carries the different conceptions or all the material vasanas, all the mental concoctions, all the mental impressions of the previous life while getting into another body. And that body type also depends on the vasanas that we carry. Please understand this. Why should it be some soul? Everything is a soul. Now, after having read the Bhagavad Gita, understood the Bhagavad Gita, every living entity, whether it's a tree, a beast, everyone is a soul. Why is it that each one has to have a different body? There has to be a reason. This is the reason. If somebody doesn't understand this and lives the life they want, nothing can, even God himself can't help. Somebody read this, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Yes, Rajpriya Mataji.
The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, tongue, and nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. So what Prabhupada says here is, he says consciousness, our soul, is pure because it is something which is an eternal part of the Supreme Lord. So it is pure. Now the contamination, how does it? Just like water. He says water is also pure. Now only when you mix some color in it, the color of the water changes to something else. When you add some mud into it, it becomes muddy water. When you're adding some ink into it, it takes the color of the ink, whether it's indigo or red or purple or green or whatever you add. So the color changes by addition of something else. Okay. But consciousness is changed according to the association of the material quality. Now what happens? The soul changes or completely undergoes a transformation based on its vasanas, based on its desires, which are influenced or supported by the gunas in the material nature. And based on that, we get that type of sense organs, that type of mind and intellect to fulfill that desire that we gather or that we desire for. Because at the end of the day, what is the work or what is the function of the super soul in our body? Super soul fulfills our desires, right? So therefore, it based on our desires and based on how we kind of inculcate it and continue to, dwell on it and, allow it to precipitate in us, the next body type will completely depend on the present desires, hankering that we have. So now he says, the foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body. The foolish just thinks, okay, this is one life and this is I lead my life. They don't ever think, why is somebody in a certain position? Why is someone very educated? Why is someone in a certain in a certain has certain facilities? And why is it some people don't have those facilities? Does it mean, we are the fortunate ones and they are the unfortunate ones? You never know. There can be a reversal of roles in the next birth. So therefore, a foolish will never understand this. He or she, lives the life the way they live, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spells of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. Only one who is spiritually inclined, who has kind of understood the Vedas, who has also understood and lived by the knowledge that one acquires from the Vedas, is the one who can really understand the purpose of a certain life, and also they can also plan what they need to really want to do in the next cycles that they are likely to go, or rather if they want to completely escape those cycles, they know what to do, which is completely being on the path of devotional service. So this is how most of us are. We don't know. Many of us, have many things. We don't know how to operate it. At the end of the day, what it means is we are all foolish. We make use of certain things without even knowing what it is, and without even knowing whether we can really use it well to the best possible extent or not. And ultimately, we need somebody else to come and help. Therefore, for basic material things, we need some expert's help. For the sake of our liberation of our soul, we need to look upon that expert, who is the Lord God himself, who is that supreme consciousness, who is the absolute truth. The absolute truth is only the truth. Now everything else is mithya. So here he says the same thing. Okay. 15.11. Mataji, somebody read. 15.11. Yeah, yes, Pushpa Mataji.
The indwelling transcendentalist who is situated in self-realization can see all this clearly, but those who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try to. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So this is, you need to go back to the, the various level of consciousness that we had studied, the Annamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya. So one who constantly tries to, go slowly elevate themselves from the bodily needs, from the mental needs, and tries to live life with complete wisdom, they are the ones who will completely be able to understand the purpose of life, and also what it entails, and how to kind of overcome certain things that is likely to kind of engage us in negativity, and how they pull themselves off from these kind of negative elements is by way of self-realization, constant self-inquiry, constant self-introspection, and contemplation on the Vedic knowledge that is contained in all these scriptures. These will help you to kind of keep your mind steady, and also keep all the kind of sense attractions away from you. And only such a person can see the value of the supreme truth, or the absolute truth, which is what this chapter, the yoga of the supreme person, or yoga of the absolute truth, is all about. Somebody wants to read this? So I'll just read the Sanskrit thing. Gam avishya chabhutani dharayami aham ojasa pushnami chausadihi sarvaha samo bhutva rasatmakaha. Somebody read this translation?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
I enter into each planet, and by my energy they stay in orbit. I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you. So the Lord here clearly establishes that the entire universe is sustained by him, and everything around it is absolutely something that is maintained by him. He is the creator, he maintains it. And he says, everything that we are enjoying, whether, when he says to supply the juice of life to all vegetables, means everything that we enjoy, everything that we kind of have, is basically something that is his mercy. Okay. Now you see this, there's a little animation there. Gravity is very important force. It keeps our planets orbiting the sun and ropes our galaxy together. How does that happen? something is far more superior than what science can actually give us. So that is the power of the Supreme Absolute or the Absolute Truth. Now he goes one step further. Here he says, Aham Vaishnavana Vaishnavanaro Bhutva Praninamam Deham Ashritaha Pranapana Samayuktaha Pachami Annam Chatur Vidam. There are 4 kinds of foods that we all living entities, consume. When they say some foods can be chewed, some food are licked up, some foods are sucked up, and some are swallowed. Okay. Now, probably as a human being, we probably can do all of this. We swallow, we chew, we lick, we can suck. And again, at different stages in our life, each of these things are the things that we do. For example, as a baby, we are probably, used to sucking. And then as we grow, we slowly start licking things that our parents give us in a spoon or with their hands. And then we are able to learn how to swallow. And then we also kind of learn how to chew as we grow, right? So, but there are certain body types that can do just one of these, not all of them. They can't do all of this. They'll do some of them or 1 or 2 of these. Okay. Now the Lord says that fire, whatever means you take the food, either by chewing, either by licking, either by swallowing, either by sucking, that ability to get it digested, that fire, that heat for digestion, he says, is the power that comes into that heat, that digestion capacity is because of the consciousness and the energy that comes into the consciousness given to us by the Lord. Okay. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivisto matah smritir jnanam apohanam cha vedai cha sarvai aham eva vedyo vedantakrit veda vid eva chaham. Here he says, I'm seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas am I to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of the Vedanta and I am the knower of the Vedas. Now, this is very important. There's something that you need to meditate and you need to possibly contemplate upon. It is so true that, that the remembrance, knowledge and forgetfulness is absolutely something nobody has been able to understand. What is it that is there in the brain that gives us the capacity to kind of remember, recall, and do things? And what happens to that same brain which was so active suddenly becomes inactive? There are people who become brain dead. There are people who are inflicted or afflicted by things that are called Parkinson's, by things called Alzheimer's. The complete capacity to remember, the complete capacity for memory, complete capacity for memorization and recall of that memorization completely gets wiped off. Medical science has not been able to find out the reason behind Alzheimer's or dementia. So what does it mean? There is a certain potential, there is a certain capacity, there is a certain energy, there is that source that gives us that capacity or keeps us in that level of, enlightenment, or gives us that ability to stay abreast or stay at the best feature, at the best form of the feature that we have. And that capacity comes from where? Please think about it. I don't think I really need to explain this beyond that. When there is a certain organ failure, has anyone been able to do any damn thing about it? They do a lot of organ transplant. Has any of them been successful? The original part is the original part. The original power given to that part cannot be replaced by any artificial part. At least, even if they have been able to do something about the kidney, no one has been able to do anything about the brain. When the brain goes dead, when Alzheimer's come in, when dementia comes in, not a single person has been able to support that person with regaining or helping them to get that memory back. Think about it. Meditate on that. Many of these things, are things that you have to constantly, brood over it, think about it, and try and figure out the answers for yourself. And ultimately, you will understand the power behind spirituality, the power behind that absolute truth, which gives us the strength to do all that we are doing. So here, the Lord says there are two classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every entity is fallible. Every entity is weak. Every entity is bound to fail. Every entity makes mistakes. That is fallible. And then is another one which is called infallible. The infallible entities are in the spiritual world. When I say spiritual world, these are also living entities. These are people who probably are a little more higher than the basic living entities like us. They are the ones who are in the higher planets. Okay, but he says, besides these two, besides the living entities or the entities like the demigods, the higher planets, and the living entities in the material platform, there is someone greater than that, and that greater person is the Lord himself. And he is the one who has entered into all these worlds, whether it's the higher planets or the lower planets. It is a Lord who kind of gives that energy for all these planets to function. Here, basically, we are trying to, this chapter helps to highlight the absolute truth, and also the powers and the wonderful, the wonderful features of the absolute truth. So here in 15.18, he says, Yasmat ksharam atito aham aksharat api chottamaha ato asmi loke vede cha pratitaha purushottamaha. Because I'm transcendental. The Lord is transcendental because he is nirguna, beyond both the fallible. He doesn't have to go through all these kind of annihilation and creation because he is the creator. All the spiritual planet, all the higher planets and the lower planets, they get created and annihilated depending on the timeline that they have to fulfill during the process of the staying phase. And because I'm the greatest, I'm celebrated, the Lord is kind of completely, people in all the planets surrender to the Lord because he is the one who is someone who is the absolute truth and who gives the energy to all the planetary system and to all the universes in the cosmos. So you can see all the demigods praying to the Lord. So here is Shiva Parvati, Brahma, and all the learned people. So 15.19, he says, Yomam evam asamudaha asamudo janati purushottamam sasarva vid bhajati mam sarva bhavena bharata. Whoever knows me as a supreme personality of Godhead without doubting, again, faith, nishta, ruchi, dridhata is very, very important, is to be understood as a knower of everything. And he therefore engages himself in full devotional service. Only you have ruchi, only when you have shraddha, only when you have the determination to kind of believe the absolute truth, will you be able to actually gain the benefit from all these studies of the Vedas and the Vedantas and all the Upanishads, including the Bhagavad Gita. So he says, this is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures. Oh, sinless one, he's telling Arjuna, oh, sinless one, and it is disclosed now by me. Whoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. Okay, so Lord calls this the most confidential knowledge. Knowing that there is the absolute truth above us is the most confidential knowledge. And this can only be understood by people who are completely have that faith and have that complete surrender attitude, that bhavana to kindly say that there is something which is more powerful and which is the absolute truth, which is beyond us. And to kind of understand that potency or that potential of the Lord, we need to completely, need to be humble, free from pride, absolutely simple and egoless. Only then will we succeed in this journey of getting on to this path of devotional service and sustaining in that path. Okay. Now here, there are a couple of verses in the last chapter of this last verse of the chapter, where in the purport, Prabhupada has really given us some wonderful. Let me just open my book also. I wanted us to read together. If you all have the time, can we read this together? Some of us. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Mataji, please.
Yeah, would you be interested? Great.
Yes, Mataji.
So, can you read this? Can someone excuse me, please help me. Can somebody read this? Read this, anyone, please? Volunteer. Can you read this paragraph? What happened? Come.
Hare Krishna.
Ah.
Thank you. The Lord clearly explains here that this is the substance of all relieved scriptures, and one should understand this as it is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, one will become intelligent and perfect in transcendental knowledge. In other words, by understanding this philosophy of Supreme Personality of Godhead and engaging in his transcendental service, everyone can become free from all contaminations of modes of material nature. Devotional service is a process of spiritual understanding. Wherever devotional service exists, the material contamination cannot coexist. Devotional service to the Lord and the Lord himself are one and the same because they are spiritual. Devotional service takes place within the internal energy of the Supreme Lord. The Lord is said to be the sun, and ignorance is called darkness. Where the sun is present, there is no question of darkness. Therefore, whenever devotional service is present, under the proper guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, there is no question of ignorance.
Yeah, thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. So, did you read? Did you get this? There is some important. Wherever devotional service exists, material contamination cannot coexist.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful line, right? And here, whenever devotional service is present, under the proper guidance of a bona fide spiritual, there's no question of ignorance. So these are two things I want you all to take away. Wherever devotional service exists, material contamination cannot exist at all. I told you devotional service is a filter. It's a natural filter. And the second one is, wherever devotional service is present, there's no question of ignorance. Because there's only, complete enlightenment. There's no ignorance. And remember what the Lord said. I am that, that Deepena, I think 10.11. He says, I am that light which will kind of, take away or, vanquish the darkness of your in your life, right? Anybody else wants to read this? The second paragraph. There's another beautiful paragraph. Anybody? What happened? What happened to all our young people today? Nobody wants to read.
Mataji, on screen it's 15.20.
15.20. Can you see? You can't read this? You can't see my screen, is it?
Yes, Mataji.
So, everyone must take to this consciousness of Krishna and engage in devotional service to become intelligent and purified. It not only enhances your intelligence, it also purifies you. Purifies your sense organs, your sense perceptions. It also purifies your mind and strengthens your intellect. And thereby, ahankaram does not exist in you. Where there is intelligence and purification, intelligence along with purification, mind you, intelligence without purification leads to ahankaram. Intelligence with purification makes you ahankaram less, ego less. Unless one comes to the position of understanding Krishna and engages in the devotional service, however intelligent he may be, in the estimation of some common man, he is not perfectly intelligent. I may have got doctorates, multiple doctorates. It doesn't make me intelligent unless I'm completely, in the process of surrendering to that supreme absolute, and therefore understand very well that purification only happens only when there is no material contamination. Okay. Now, there is another word. I don't want to read all of it. There's another verse which I liked a lot. This last word. This last is very beautiful. So here he says, while one is performing devotional service in the association of pure devotees of Krishna, please understand, the association is very important. You need to have that like-minded circle. That like-minded circle is what helps you to kind of completely enhance your knowledge and enhance your ability to stay with that knowledge and use that knowledge in your life. So when one is performing devotional service in the association of pure devotees in full Krishna consciousness, there are certain things which require to be vanquished altogether. The most important thing is one has to surmount his weakness of the heart. The first fall down is caused by the desire to the Lord to lord it over material nature. It always happens. See, there are certain things which you have to give up, and you will automatically give up, because where there is devotion, where there is knowledge of of the devotion, devotional service, and as well as the Vedas, which is something that helps us to elevate ourselves, automatically your ability to kind of look beyond the material things will automatically come in. Thus, one gives up transcendental loving service to the Supreme. The second weakness of the heart is that as one increases the propensity to lord it over, he becomes attached. So now Lord is, what is he saying? We are so contaminated that we want to kind of completely, enjoy more and more. That is the first weakness. The second weakness is when I want to kind of completely own more and more, and completely plunder and loot the material energy around us, he becomes attached to matter. You become attached to your body, and you become attached to the bodily needs. So you have to conquer that. And how do you conquer that? Spirituality and devotional service helps you to conquer that. Now he says, the problems of material existence are due to the weakness of the heart. Weakness of the heart is weakness of the mind at the emotional level. Therefore, we need to keep our emotions in check. So he says in this chapter, the first five verses, what we read about the Ashwatha tree, describes a process of freeing oneself from the weakness of how? By cutting that tree with the axe of detachment. And the rest of the chapter, from the 6th verse to end, discusses the Purushottama Yoga, or the exuberance of the Lord himself. Okay? Is that okay? Hare Krishna. Everybody?
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Was this chapter easy, tough, difficult, or did you enjoy it?
Mataji, this chapter was moderate.
Moderate.
And I really enjoyed it, actually. And the explanation of the banyan tree was really amazing, and it was new to me.
Yeah, so think about it. Go back to chapter 15. Go back to Prabhupada's purports. You will enjoy it even more now. Now that you have a hang of what it means, you will enjoy it. Okay? Okay, anyone else? Any other question? Any other thoughts? Hare Krishna. Any comments?
Mataji, the three verses are 16, 17, 18. They are the Tri-Sloki Gita.
That is Chatushloki sloka comes in.
This is try, not Chatushloki.
That I don't know, Mataji. Is it? Which one is it?
16, 17, 18. Tri-Sloki Gita.
16, 17, 18. That I'm not sure, Mataji. Okay. It's called the summary of the Vedas and Vedanta.
Okay.
Because it talks about the two classes of being, the Kshara and the Akshara. And then it talks about the Lord being higher than the Kshara and the Akshara. And then that he is the supreme, transcendental, infallible, supreme spirit. Yeah.
The Chatushloki is the 10th chapter.
10th chapter, 10.8 to 10.11. Yeah. This I've not heard about. The Trishloki I've not heard. Maybe you're right. Not sure, Mataji. So tomorrow we shall meet for chapter 16. Okay. Chapter 16, which is the chapter 16. The name of the chapter is, this will be very interesting. The divine qualities and the demonic qualities. This is a very interesting chapter. Don't miss this chapter tomorrow. What are the divine qualities? And you'll be surprised. You will be so surprised. This chapter will throw a lot of surprises for you tomorrow. Okay, it's a beautiful chapter. So we'll meet tomorrow. It's a short chapter, it's only 24 verses. We'll try and cover all the verses tomorrow. So if there are no questions, we shall close this session. Okay, everyone? May I, with your permission, shall I close the session?
Yes, Mataji.
Okay. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhobhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. See you all tomorrow. Have a good evening. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Same to you.